As many of you know, I'm from Pittsburgh. I was and still am a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. But what you probably don't know that Ernie Stautner was the first Pittsburgh Steeler to ever have his number retired by the Steelers. The first player, Ernie Stautner, he wore number 70. And he played for the Steelers from 1950 to 63, which is before they were any good, okay? But when I played Pee Wee football, I decided I wanted his number. I wanted to wear 70. So I went to my Little League coach. I said, I want 70. And he said, sorry, you can't have it. It's taken. And now when I think about it, like, who takes number 70? Nobody. It's not a cool number. So naturally, for reasons you probably all know, I chose 46, right? Obviously, because 46 is the hexadecimal version of 70. Hexadecimal, when you count in hexadecimal, when you count to 16, that's 10 in hexadecimal. So how you count is this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then you go A, B, C, D, E, F. So F is like 15, and after F is 10 when you count in hexadecimal. Then it goes 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. That would be 15, okay? Or 31. Then it goes to 20, okay? Who here hates math? Who does this stuff? Who does this? Why? Actually, okay, the story I told you, I just totally made up, okay? Ernie Stautner's real, but when I played Pee Wee football, I did wear 46, but not because it was 70 in hexadecimal. I didn't know what hexadecimal was until I got to college, when I went to I was engineering undergrad. And I didn't know who Ernie Stautner was until later. But actually, hexadecimal was something a lot of computer folks use because computers talk in ones and zeros, and they group them in blocks of 16 generally. So you can represent 16 ones and zeros through hexadecimal. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about that, okay? I'm not going to talk about that. But who invented this stuff that torments us so? Was it invented? Who invented numbers? Did they need to be invented or discovered? Or did they always exist? Did you know that the Romans did not have a concept of zero? They did not. Harvard mathematics professor and historian Robert Kaplan writes, the first evidence that we have of zero is from the Sumerian culture of Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. And it made its way to the Babylonian Empire and from there to India via the Greeks, whose own culture only had a concept of zero late in its history. But the Romans, who came after the Greeks, had no concept of zero at all. And it wasn't until the Arabs, merchants, brought zero from India to the West. So in some sense, numbers are invented, or maybe were they just discovered? They always existed and they just were discovered. I don't know. When we talk about natural numbers, we have numbers that are prime, which are made up of only a product of itself and the number 1, like 7. You can only get 7 by multiplying 1 and the number 7. We have composite numbers that are made of other numbers, like 6. You can get it by 1 times 6, but also 2 times 3. Those are composite numbers. My point here is that prime numbers and composites, they have characteristics. Who gave them these characteristics? Were they invented? Were they assigned? Did God do this? When we think about the Big Bang or any creation story that you may have or subscribe to, Did that also bring numbers into existence? Or did they somehow exist outside of time? And what is the significance of your answer to that question?
Now's the time in our service when we share our joys with each other to magnify them and our sorrows to divide the weight of their pain. If you're so moved, please feel free to come forward and express the joy or sorrow that you may have in the microphone and drop a pebble in the bowl. For anyone attending via live stream, you may share your joy or sorrow in the chat.
Good morning. I'm Ann Bender, and y'all are too shy to come up, so I'll do three. First of all, today is Dirk's birthday, so happy birthday. Danielle's birthday is on the 29th, and she'll be 23. And many of you know Diantha Horton. Today is her birthday, and she would love to hear from you, I'm sure. She will be, I won't say. Happy birthday, everybody.
This is a first for me. This is going to be a grandma brag. My grandson, Luke, is a sophomore at UGA, and he's in the School of Wildlife and Fisheries. And he just found out this week that he was awarded a scholarship for next year because of his excellence in that school. And he's been on the president's list every semester. And my youngest grandchild, my granddaughter, who's up in Pennsylvania, they're coming next week to visit, and she's 12. And she's a member of the county-wide chorus, and this last weekend they had their concert, and she was invited to sing a solo. So I'm, of course, very proud of them and also of the people they are. But I also wanted to say that I have great faith in the Gen Z coming up and what they can accomplish.
One pebble of sorrow for the people of Mississippi who've been affected by the recent tornado there on, I guess it was Friday night.
And I actually have a pebble of joy for a good friend of mine who she's been dealing with cancer for a few years now and just got some really good news from her latest scans, and we're just all really happy about that. So. I don't see any on the live chat, so I'll drop one final pebble for any joys and sorrows that are still too tender to share today, and may we keep one another in our thoughts in the coming week. This is a reading entitled Alienation from God by Christian Wyman. If you come to the idea of faith as first of all an intellectual assent, as Thomas Merton does, or if you think of it as not as a state of mind at all, but as a being seized by being itself, as Paul Tillich does, or if you construct some sort of inductive faith out of the moments of transcendence in your ordinary life, as Peter Berger does, or if you feel that faith is wholly a matter of grace and thus outside of man's control altogether, as Karl Barth does, or if you feel, as I do, that every one of these definitions has some truth in it, then you are still left with this question: why? Why should existence be arranged so that our alienation from God is a given, and we must forever fight our way not simply toward what he is, but toward the whole notion that he is? If you let go of the literal creation story as it comes down through Genesis, if you let go of the Garden of Eden, the intellectual apple, the whole story of man's separation from God, tied to the tongue of the talking snake, if you let go of these things, and who but a child could hold on to them, then you are left, paradoxically, with a child's insistent question: why?
Seven years ago, a preschool-aged Presley Callan strapped safely in the back seat of her car. Yes, the same Presley Callan who was up here last week as part of the youth service. The same Presley Callan who has an affinity, a fondness for peanut butter under her armpits at the talent show. Yes, that Presley Callan. They were on their way to Zaxby's to pick up some fast food, and she was thinking quietly in the back seat. She couldn't work it out. She had to ask her mom, "Mom, who's God's mom?" Well, Kelly, Callan's mom, or Presley's mom, recognizing the seriousness of this question, pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and looked at her daughter and said, "Now that is a great question. People have been wondering about that for a long time. What do you think?" Presley said, "I'm not sure, but it's really hurting my head. Just thinking about it." You generally don't expect such deep philosophical questions from 4-year-olds sitting in the back seat on your way to get fast food. But spoiler alert for any expecting parents, Lexi and Hayden. Parents have to be ready for anything. But just who is God's mom? I guess it could depend upon what God you might be talking about. Even in the Hebrew Bible, in what some call the Old Testament, even in the Hebrew Bible, when Moses is getting the 10 Commandments from God, God himself kind of indicates that there are other gods. The first commandment is, "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." And when Moses confronts Pharaoh to let his people go, Moses says to Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go." Which kind of led Pharaoh to believe, wait, the Lord, the God of Israel, does that mean there's a God of other peoples too? But Pharaoh's kind of confused because he doesn't know about this God called Lord. And Pharaoh replies, "Who is this Lord that I should heed him? I do not know the Lord." Like Pharaoh saying, I don't know your guy, okay? I don't know him. In the Hindu tradition, there are many gods who have been given birth by other gods. For instance, there are many different kinds of Hinduism. It's like a big umbrella. But across all of them, one of the most popular gods is the Hindu god of good fortune called Ganesha. He's typically shown seated, a human form with 4 arms and an elephant's head. Ganesha is the offspring of the Hindu god Shiva and his consort Parvati. And of course, in Christianity, they don't really say that the Virgin Mary gave birth to God, okay? They say that the Virgin Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is a man different from God the Father, yet of the same essence. That's part of the doctrine of the Trinity. But in Christianity, there's no mother for God the Father. Plato believed in something called a divine mind, the One, that did nothing in deed or action, yet it affected the world like the constant shining of the sun. And not coincidentally, many cultures worshiped the sun as a god. It didn't do anything except travel across the sky, yet it gave life to all things. Plants that they would grow needed sunlight. Plato's divine mind, the One, existed outside of time and space. This is Plato. Plato's theorizing this. St. Augustine, who's probably the most influential Christian theologian, got many of his theological ideas from Plato, and now they are part of accepted Christian doctrine. Who's God's mom? That's an interesting philosophical question to think about, and many religious traditions have tried to deal with that. Did God create everything? Did God cause the Big Bang to happen, if you believe in the Big Bang? Did God create numbers? Do numbers exist outside of time? Did God need to create them? Augustine said, God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Author Alex Wilkinson writes about the mysteries of mathematics. He writes, "The grand and enfolding mystery is whether mathematics is created by human beings or exists independently of us in a territory adjacent to the actual world, the location of which no one can specify. Plato called it the non-spatiotemporal realm. It is a timeless nowhere that never has and never will exist anywhere, but that is nevertheless." In Plato's non-spatiotemporal realm, the One existed along with many other things he theorized. He called them perfect forms, that everything on earth was kind of an imperfect manifestation of this of perfection in another realm. We have triangles here. We had a perfect triangle there. Square, perfect square there, imperfect here. A perfect tree there, an imperfect tree here. a perfect soul there, and that we all here were somehow tainted as imperfect souls. Again, St. Augustine, and many others actually, there were other traditions, grabbed onto that kind of idea that there's something imperfection in us. And that became part of Christianity and many religions, that we didn't belong here and that we needed to go someplace else to get back to that realm. That was what Augustine thought, and that's what Plato thought. But many disagreed. There was one who disagreed, was a Franciscan monk named William of Ockham. He has something called Occam's razor that is attributed to him. Occam's razor is kind of explained thus. Given several possible explanations for something, the simplest explanation is likely closest to the truth. That's how it's typically put, and I think that's really bad. I don't think that's put well at all, and I don't think that's what he meant. To me, in layman's terms, Occam's razor says, don't add stuff that you don't know about to explain what's going on here. Don't add layers of stuff. And he thought Plato's realm of perfect things was stuff that shouldn't be added. It doesn't help. It doesn't explain anything. Don't add things that we have no access to explain what's going on. We can't see around that corner, so don't add it. That's really what Occam's razor is talking about. He was eventually excommunicated as a friar. You can't do that. Yes. When you get right down to it, questions like, who's God's mom? Who or what is God? Why? Does God exist or not exist? There are indications of deeper questions about mystery, wonder, and awe. Does God exist? 11th century Archbishop of Canterbury, Anselm, said, just thinking of such a question is indicative that there is a God. Why posit a question about something that you wouldn't know about? He said, once you understand the concept of God, you will see that it is impossible for him not to exist. Writer and poet and cancer survivor Christian Wyman, whose reading we just read earlier, believes that you really can't understand or know God until you are up against it, until you get back to your original innocence that you've lost with all this knowledge that we're gathering during the course of our lives. He writes in his book, My Bright Abyss, the frustration we feel when trying to explain or justify God is a symptom of knowledge untethered from innocence, like we have none or lost it. He continues, our belief occurring wholly on a human plane. Innocence returns us to the first call of God, to any moment in our lives when we were rendered mute with awe, fear, and wonder. Absent this, there's no sense in arguing for God in order to convince others, for we ourselves are not convinced. So let me repeat some of that. Innocence returns us to the first call of God, to any moment in our lives when we were rendered mute with awe, fear, wonder. He regained his innocence and returned to the first call of God when he was forced to face the abyss of his cancer diagnosis. Perhaps a loss of knowledge, perhaps a forced return to innocence is necessary for us to have, forever to have faith in or truly see anything. It reminds me of the movie Field of Dreams. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but in the movie, there are ghosts, baseball ghosts, playing a baseball game on a field. Okay? Not everybody can see them. And in one scene, while the baseball game's going on, one character who doesn't see the ghost walks right across the field and begins arguing with the main character, played by Kevin Costner. And as they're arguing, Kevin Costner's daughter starts choking, and she's about to die until she's revived. It's a traumatic experience. And as soon as this unbeliever who doesn't see the ghost gets up from that experience, he looks at the field and says, hey, when did all these players show up? He returned to his innocence in that moment, and he was able to see something he couldn't see before. This is not really a technical discussion about God or not God or God's mother. Technical discussions with proofs and postulates and reasons and rationality, that's not the point. I believe there's a name. I've said this before. There's a name for someone who must live in the realm of postulates and theorems and reason and rationality 100% of the time. And that is a fundamentalist. A different sort, but still a fundamentalist. Because ultimately, we can't see around the corner, ever. Ultimately, it comes down to matters of faith. And perhaps faith, by definition, is built upon a house of cards. Christian philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called it the irrationality of faith, that I believe because it is absurd. If we cling to proofs, theorems, knowledge, reasons, and rationality, if we hitch our wagons to that, I believe it ultimately leads to an empty place. Yet hitching our wagons to our inherent innocence, vulnerability, to the absurdity that we are lucky enough to be given this chance. It's this thing called a life, imbued with love and suffering and sadness and loss and joy. That's rich. The poet Rumi wrote, "That which God said to the rose and caused it to laugh in full-blown beauty, he said to my heart, and it made it 100 times more beautiful."
In an effort to fulfill and further the vision and mission of this congregation, we ask that our members and friends share of our time, treasure, and talents. And with this, we will now take the offering. You may also give using the Givelify app.
May
We accept this sacred offering, generously given by our beloved friends, members and friends, and may we use it wisely and judiciously in service to our mission.
This is a reading entitled God Went to Beauty School by Cynthia Rylant. God went to beauty school. He went there to learn how to give a good perm and ended up just crazy about nails. So he opened up his own shop. Nails by Jim, he called it. He was afraid to call it Nails by God. He was sure people would think he was being disrespectful and using his own name in vain. And nobody would tip. He got into nails, of course, because he'd always loved hands. Hands were some of the best things he'd ever done. And this way, he could just hold one in his and admire those delicate bones just above the knuckles, delicate as birds' wings. And after he'd done that a while, he could paint all the nails any color he wanted, then say, beautiful, and mean it. And now please join us in singing hymn number 1053, How Could Anyone? And now let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of commitment, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The words of Taoist writer Deng Dao. We cannot know the Tao directly because it has no definitions, references, or names. Yet it is this precisely colorless infinity that is the underlying reality to this life. The only way to fathom it is to remove our sense of division from it. In essence, we must plunge into the mystery itself. Only then will we know peace. Go in peace and enjoy your week.
Remind me again what I need to do. So the bowls go behind.
Yeah.